I was only 9 years old when I buried my father, and that same night, I promised to become the man of the house. Every morning before school, I worked in secret, so my little sister would never have to go to bed hungry. No child should ever have to choose between homework and keeping their family alive. But that became my life. I used to think every family looked like mine. Every Saturday morning, my dad would wake me up before the sun had fully risen. He'd pull the blanket off me and clap his hands together. "Come on, sleepyhead," he'd laugh. "The world doesn't wait for dreamers." I'd groan dramatically, burying my face in the pillow, pretending I couldn't hear him. But he'd always win. He'd tickle my feet until I surrendered. "I'm awake! I'm awake!" He'd grin like he'd just won the lottery. That's my boy. Those words meant everything to me. My name is Ethan Carter, and when this story began, I was only 9 years old. Back then, life was simple. We lived in a tiny white house on Maple Street. It wasn't fancy. The paint peeled off the walls. The porch leaned slightly to one side. The roof leaked whenever it rained too hard. But to me, it was home. My mom filled every room with warmth. Every morning, she'd hum old country songs while making pancakes. She wasn't a professional singer, not even close. But to me, she sounded better than anyone on the radio. She always said the same thing whenever I complained about school. Kindness costs nothing, Ethan. If you can't be the smartest kid in class, be the kindest. I never forgot that. Then there was my little sister, Lily. She was only 4. She believed monsters lived under the bed, but that superheroes lived in the kitchen, because Mom always made everything better. She followed me everywhere. If I climbed a tree, she wanted to climb it too. If I built a blanket fort, she wanted her own bedroom inside it. If I cried, she cried even louder. She called me Ethan because she couldn't pronounce Ethan. I never corrected her. I secretly loved it. Dad worked construction. His hands were rough enough to sand wood. Every evening, he'd come home covered in dust, smelling like fresh lumber and sweat. Mom would wrinkle her nose dramatically. "You smell terrible." Dad would smile. That's the smell of paying bills. Then he'd hug her anyway. She'd pretend to complain while laughing. Looking back, those little moments were priceless. I just didn't know they were disappearing. One afternoon, after school, Dad picked me up in his old blue pickup truck. The truck was ancient. The passenger door only opened if you kicked it first. The radio only played one country station. The air conditioner had been broken for years. Still, I loved that truck. As we drove home, Dad glanced at me. So, how'd the math test go? I looked out the window. I don't want to talk about it. Oh. Silence. So. Bad. I nodded. I got a 64. Dad didn't yell. He didn't sigh. Instead, he pulled into a small ice cream shop. I looked at him in confusion. "Aren't you mad?" He shook his head. "I'm disappointed." My stomach sank. "But not because of your grade." I frowned. "I'm disappointed because you're scared to fail." He ordered 2 vanilla cones. Then we sat outside, watching cars pass by. "Ethan," he said quietly, "do you know how many mistakes I've made building houses?" "No." "Thousands." I stared at him. "Thousands?" He laughed. "You know why those houses are still standing?" I shrugged. "Because every mistake taught me something." He pointed at my ice cream. "You only fail when you stop trying." At 9 years old, those words felt ordinary. Years later, they became the reason I survived. That evening, everything felt perfect. Mom made spaghetti. Dad accidentally dropped garlic bread on the floor. Our golden retriever, Buddy, stole it before anyone could react. Lily laughed so hard, milk came out of her nose. Mom couldn't stop laughing either. Dad raised his hands dramatically. "I swear that dog is faster every week." Buddy wagged his tail proudly. It was loud, messy, ordinary. If someone had taken a picture of us that night, you'd think nothing could ever break us. Around 9 o'clock, Mom tucked Lily into bed. Dad sat beside me on the porch. Fireflies danced across the yard. The summer air smelled like freshly cut grass. Dad looked unusually quiet. "Dad? Are you okay?" He forced a smile. "Just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately." He looked away. "Work's been complicated." "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "It means grown-up problems. I hated that answer. Adults always used those words when they didn't want kids to know the truth. He reached into his pocket. "I've got something for you." He handed me an old silver compass. The glass was scratched. The metal was worn. It looked older than he was. It belonged to your grandfather. I held it carefully. It's beautiful. It always points north. I smiled. Cool. Then his expression changed. But remember something. What? A compass doesn't choose your path. I looked up. It only reminds you where you are. I didn't fully understand, but I nodded anyway. He placed his hand on my shoulder. No matter what happens. His voice caught for just a second. Always find your way back to who you are. Those were strange words. Too serious. Too heavy. I almost asked him why he was talking like that. But before I could, Mom opened the screen door. "You two coming inside?" Dad smiled. "In a minute." She kissed him on the forehead before walking back inside. He watched her longer than usual, as if he were memorizing her face. The next morning started like every other. Mom made breakfast. Lily chased Buddy around the kitchen. Dad kissed Mom goodbye. He ruffled my hair. "Be good today." "I always am." He laughed. "That's a bold lie." He hugged Lily. "Love you, Peanut." "I love you bigger." Then he looked at Mom. Neither of them spoke. They simply smiled at each other. A long, quiet, almost painful smile. Dad walked out the front door. He climbed into his blue truck, started the engine, waved once, and drove away. I stood at the window, eating cereal, watching until the truck disappeared around the corner. I didn't know it then, but that was the last morning I would ever see my father as the man who tucked me in at night. By sunset, our lives would begin to unravel in ways no 9-year-old could ever imagine. People always say that life can change in a single moment. I never believed that. I thought change happened slowly, like growing taller or watching the seasons change. I was wrong. Sometimes, your entire world collapses between breakfast and dinner. That Tuesday started like every other school day. Mrs. Anderson wrote multiplication problems across the whiteboard, while everyone groaned. I stared out the classroom window, watching the leaves dance in the wind. I wasn't thinking about math. I was thinking about the baseball game Dad had promised we'd watch that evening. The local team was playing, and he'd told me on the drive to school the day before. Tonight, buddy. Just you and me. I'd been looking forward to it all day. Halfway through class, the office speaker crackled. Mrs. Anderson, could you please send Ethan Carter to the principal's office? The room went silent. Every kid looked at me.
Mrs. Anderson smiled gently. Take your backpack, Ethan. My backpack? She nodded. You won't be coming back to class today. My stomach twisted. Had I done something wrong? I hadn't been in a fight. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't even forgotten my homework. As I walked down the hallway, every step felt heavier. The principal, Mr. Collins, was waiting outside his office. Beside him stood a woman I recognized, Mrs. Ramirez. She lived 2 houses down from us. She smiled, but her eyes were red. Ethan, she whispered, kneeling in front of me. You're coming with me. Why? She looked at Mr. Collins before answering. Your mom needs you. That was all she said. But something inside me broke. The drive home felt endless. Mrs. Ramirez kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other gripping a tissue. She tried to smile every few minutes. It never reached her eyes. I looked out the window. Is my mom okay? Silence. Mrs. Ramirez? She swallowed hard. She's waiting for you. Where's my dad? She didn't answer. Did something happen at work? Still nothing. By then, my heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it. Children know. Adults think they're protecting us by staying quiet. But silence tells its own story. As we turned onto Maple Street, I noticed the police cars first, then the ambulance, then all the neighbors standing outside our house. People I'd known my whole life were gathered in little groups, whispering. Some were crying. My legs suddenly felt too weak to move. Mrs. Ramirez parked the car. Ethan? I opened the door before she finished. I ran, past the neighbors, past the yellow tape, past the flashing lights. I burst through the front door. Mom! She was sitting on the living room floor, holding Lily. Both of them were crying. Mom looked up the moment she saw me. She reached for me with trembling hands. I threw myself into her arms. What happened? She couldn't answer. She just hugged me tighter. Mom. Her body shook as she cried into my shoulder. Finally, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, Daddy had an accident. The room disappeared around me. What kind of accident? No answer. Is he at the hospital? She buried her face against my neck. Ethan, can we go see him? She cried harder. I want to see Dad. She looked into my eyes, and I knew. Before she spoke, I knew. Her lips trembled. He isn't coming home. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at her. No. She nodded through her tears. No. Ethan. No. I stood up so fast that I knocked over the coffee table. No. I ran through the house. Dad! I checked the kitchen, the garage, the backyard, his workshop, the porch, every room. Dad? Nothing. I opened the front door and ran into the street.
Dad! The neighbors looked away. One of the police officers stepped toward me. I pulled away. He's at work! I shouted. You're wrong! Nobody answered. Nobody had to. That night was the quietest night our house had ever known. No laughter, no television, no smell of Dad's coffee brewing for the next morning. Just silence. Lily refused to let go of Mom's hand. She kept asking the same question. When's Daddy coming home? Mom couldn't answer anymore. Every time Lily asked, Mom cried. So eventually, I answered instead. Soon. It was a lie. The first big lie I'd ever told. I hated myself for saying it. But Lily was only 4. How do you explain forever to someone who still believes every scraped knee can be kissed away? The funeral was 3 days later. I'd never worn a suit before. It scratched my neck. Everyone kept saying how handsome I looked. I wanted to scream. I didn't want to look handsome. I wanted my dad. The church was packed. Construction workers, neighbors, teachers, people I'd never met. One after another, they told me stories about my father. He helped me build my first home. He fixed my roof without charging me. He stayed late every Friday to help the younger workers. He talked about you kids every single day. I smiled politely. But inside, I felt empty. Then someone placed a folded American flag into my mother's hands. She held it like it was made of glass. I didn't understand why everyone was crying harder. Years later, I learned that the flag represented my father's years of service, before he became a construction worker. At 9 years old, it only looked like another reminder that he wasn't coming back. After everyone left, I wandered back into Dad's workshop. His hammer still sat on the workbench. His work gloves were hanging on the wall. His coffee mug still had dried coffee at the bottom. Everything smelled like him. Sawdust, motor oil, soap. I picked up one of his flannel shirts and held it against my face. For a second, I could almost pretend. Almost. Then I noticed something on the workbench. The old silver compass he'd given me. Beside it was a folded piece of paper. It had my name written across the front. For Ethan. My hands trembled as I unfolded it.
The handwriting was unmistakably his. Buddy, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you something in person. I don't know what tomorrow holds. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes grown-ups worry about things they can't control. But I need you to remember 3 things. First, take care of your mother. She is stronger than anyone you know, even when she doesn't feel like it. Second, protect Lily. She will always look up to you, even when you're both grown. And finally, never believe that being a man means hiding your tears. The strongest people I've ever known weren't afraid to cry. They were afraid to stop loving. I'm proud of you, not because of what you've done, but because of who you already are. No matter where life takes you, you'll always be my son. I love you more than words can ever say. Dad. The tears came all at once. I fell to my knees, clutching the letter to my chest. For the first time since Mom had whispered those impossible words, I cried. Not quietly, not politely. I cried until my throat burned and my chest ached. Because in that moment, I realized something no child should ever have to understand. My father had left me his love. But love couldn't tuck me into bed. Love couldn't help Mom pay the bills. Love couldn't answer Lily when she cried for him in the middle of the night. As I sat alone in the workshop, surrounded by the tools he'd never use again, I made a promise only the walls could hear. I'll take care of them, Dad. I was only 9 years old. I didn't know how. I didn't know what it would cost me. But that promise would change the rest of my life. People tell children that everything will be okay. They say it because they want to believe it themselves. After Dad's funeral, everyone promised they would help us. If you need anything, just call. We're only a few houses away. Your father was a wonderful man. For the first couple of weeks, people brought casseroles, groceries, and flowers. Our refrigerator was fuller than it had ever been. Neighbors mowed our lawn. Church members stopped by almost every day. I thought maybe everyone was right. Maybe things really would be okay. Then, little by little, they stopped coming. The flowers wilted. The phone stopped ringing. The casseroles disappeared. Life moved on for everyone else. But ours had frozen in place. One evening, about a month after Dad died, I woke up because I heard voices in the kitchen. Mom thought Lily and I were asleep. I quietly stepped into the hallway. The kitchen light was on. Mom sat at the table with papers spread out in front of her. Across from her was a man wearing glasses. Mr. Howard, our bank manager. I've done everything I can, he said gently. Mom rubbed her temples. There has to be another option. He sighed. The mortgage is already 2 months behind. I'll catch up. Emily. His voice softened. I know you're trying. Mom stared at the stack of bills. Medical bills, utility bills, mortgage statements, insurance notices. They covered almost the entire table.
I just need more time. Mr. Howard folded his hands. If the payments aren't made soon... He couldn't finish the sentence. Mom whispered it herself. We lose the house. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything I'd heard since Dad died. Lose the house? Our house? The porch where Dad taught me to throw a baseball? The kitchen where Mom sang while making pancakes? The backyard where Lily chased butterflies? No, that couldn't happen. The next morning, Mom tried to smile.
She packed our lunches, but I noticed she didn't eat breakfast. You forgot your toast, I said. I'm not hungry. Her stomach growled loud enough for all of us to hear. She laughed awkwardly. Guess it misagrees. I looked down at my plate. 2 pieces of toast. 1 egg. I quietly slid the egg onto her plate. She looked at me. Ethan, I'm full. She knew I was lying. She pushed it back. So am I. Neither of us touched it. Lily happily ate hers without noticing. That was the first time I realized adults lied to protect children, and children lied to protect adults. School became different. I stopped raising my hand in class, stopped laughing with my friends, stopped caring about recess. Instead, I watched the clock. Every minute I spent at school felt like a minute Mom was home alone, trying to figure out how to save us. Mrs. Anderson noticed. One afternoon, she asked me to stay after class. How are you doing? I'm fine. She smiled sadly. You don't have to be. I shrugged. I'm okay. She handed me a coloring sheet. I know. I stared at it. I'm too old to color. She laughed softly. No, you aren't. But I didn't color it, because somehow, in just a few weeks, I felt like I'd become much older than 9. One Friday afternoon, I walked past the grocery store on my way home. Outside stood an elderly man struggling to load bags into his truck. Before I could think, I ran over. Need help? He smiled. I'd appreciate it. I carried 3 heavy bags. When we finished, he reached into his wallet. He handed me a crisp $20 bill. Oh, no, sir. Take it. I was just helping. So let me help you. I hesitated. Dad had always taught me not to take money for being kind. But then I remembered Mom staring at those bills. I slowly accepted it. Thank you. He smiled. You've got a good heart, son. I walked into the grocery store. For the first time in my life, I bought food by myself. A loaf of bread, peanut butter, milk, a dozen eggs. There wasn't enough money for anything else. When I got home, I quietly placed the bags on the kitchen counter. Mom frowned. Where did these come from? I found some money. She looked at me carefully. Found it? I nodded. She didn't believe me, but she also didn't ask another question. That night, we had peanut butter sandwiches. It tasted like the best meal I'd ever eaten. A few days later, I noticed something strange. Every morning before school, newspapers were delivered all over our neighborhood. Most landed in driveways. Some ended up in bushes. Others blew into the street. The delivery driver looked exhausted. He was older, maybe in his 60s. One rainy morning, I walked up to him. Can I help? He looked surprised.
You'll get soaked. I don't mind. For 20 minutes, I helped toss newspapers onto porches. When we finished, he smiled. You've got a strong arm. Thanks. He reached into his pocket. I can give you $10. I shook my head. You don't have to. I know. He placed the money in my hand anyway. As I walked away,
an idea formed in my mind. What if I could do this every morning? The next day, I asked him, "Do you ever need extra help?" He scratched his chin. "Sometimes." It isn't. That night, after she thought I was asleep, I heard her crying in her bedroom again. But this time, she wasn't crying because she'd lost her husband. She was crying because she just realized she'd almost lost her son's childhood too. As I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I reached into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around Dad's old silver compass. I remembered his words. Take care of your mother. Protect Lily. I had made him a promise. And no matter how tired I became, no matter what it cost me, I intended to keep it. Little did I know, the hardest test of that promise was still waiting just around the corner. People think grief is the hardest part of losing someone. It isn't. Grief slowly changes. Some days it's loud, some days it's quiet. But poverty never whispers. It reminds you every single day that you're one bill away from losing everything. By the time winter arrived, our little house felt different. Not because it had changed, because we had. Mom no longer sang while making breakfast. The radio stayed off. The laughter that once filled every room had been replaced by silence. Even Buddy, our golden retriever, seemed quieter. He spent hours lying beside Dad's empty recliner, staring at the front door, as if he still expected him to walk through it. Sometimes I caught myself doing the same thing. The first snowstorm came in early December. It was beautiful. The entire neighborhood looked like a Christmas postcard. Kids laughed outside, building snowmen and throwing snowballs. Normally, I'd have been right there with them. Instead, I was standing in our basement, beside the old furnace. It had stopped working. The house grew colder by the hour. Mom called 3 repair companies. The cheapest estimate was almost $900. She thanked them politely before hanging up. Then she sat at the kitchen table and buried her face in her hands. "We can't afford it," she whispered. She didn't know I was standing in the hallway. That night, we slept wearing our winter coats. The next morning, Lily climbed into my bed. "Ethan, what is it?" "I'm cold." Her tiny hands felt like ice. I wrapped my blanket around both of us. "It's okay. When's the heat coming back?" "Soon." Another lie. I was becoming good at them. Too good. A few days later, Mom started working 2 jobs. During the day, she cleaned rooms at a small motel. At night, she worked as a waitress at a diner across town. She left before sunrise. Sometimes she didn't come home until after midnight. She was always exhausted. One evening, I noticed something that scared me. Her hands were bleeding. Tiny cracks had formed across her knuckles from using cleaning chemicals all day. "Mom?" She quickly hid them behind her back. "It's nothing." I walked to the bathroom, found the first aid kit, then gently spread ointment across her hands. She smiled through tears. "I should be taking care of you." "You are." "No." She looked down. "I'm trying." I squeezed her hand. "You're doing great." The truth was, she wasn't failing. The world was simply asking too much of her. A week before Christmas, something
happened at school. Mrs. Anderson announced that every student would bring a small gift for the class holiday exchange. The limit was $15. Everyone cheered excitedly. I felt sick. $15. That was almost half a day's work. Money that could buy milk, bread, eggs, gas for Mom's car. There was no way. That afternoon, my best friend Noah ran beside me after school. "Ethan!" "What? What are you getting for the gift exchange?" "I don't know yet. My dad's taking me shopping tonight." "Cool. You should come." "I can't." "Why?" "I've got stuff." He shrugged. "Okay." He ran off. I watched him disappear into the crowd. I hated myself for lying, but I hated the truth even more. The following Monday, every student placed a wrapped present beneath the classroom Christmas tree.
Every student, except me. Mrs. Anderson noticed immediately. "Ethan? I forgot." She smiled kindly. "It happens." But I saw the concern in her eyes. I spent the rest of the day pretending not to notice the colorful boxes under the tree. Each one reminded me of something we couldn't afford. That evening, I worked longer than usual helping Mr. Frank deliver newspapers. Snow covered the sidewalks. The bags felt twice as heavy. When we finally finished, Frank handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "A Christmas bonus." I opened it. Inside was $200. My eyes widened. "I can't take this." "Sure you can. It's too much." He smiled. "No, it's not enough." I looked at him. He patted my shoulder. "I had a son once." My heart stopped. "Had?" He would have been about your age now. Silence. "He passed away years ago." "I'm sorry." He smiled sadly. "When I look at you," he paused, "I see the kind of young man I hoped he'd become." I didn't know what to say, so I hugged him. He hugged me back. Sometimes the people who aren't family become exactly what you need. The next morning, I secretly bought a small art set for the school gift exchange. It cost $12. When I wrapped it, I smiled for the first time in weeks. At school, no one knew I'd almost skipped the exchange. No one knew how much that little box had cost me. During the gift swap, I received a pair of warm knitted gloves. There wasn't a name attached. Mrs. Anderson simply smiled when I opened them. "They look like they'll fit." I looked at her. She looked away quickly. I realized she'd bought them herself, without making me feel embarrassed, without telling anyone. Years later, I still remember those gloves more than any expensive gift I've ever received.
Christmas Eve arrived. Our tree was tiny. Most of the ornaments were handmade. There were only 3 presents underneath. One for Lily, one for Mom, one for me. Mom apologized before we opened them. "I'm sorry Christmas isn't bigger this year." Lily smiled. "But it's still Christmas." Children have a way of saying things adults. We opened our gifts. Lily got a stuffed bunny. She hugged it so tightly its ears bent sideways. Mom received a framed family picture. I had secretly printed it at school with Mrs. Anderson's help. She cried the moment she saw it. My gift was a thick blue scarf. Mom had knitted it herself. I made it during my lunch breaks. I wrapped it around my neck. It's perfect. It wasn't just a scarf. It was every free minute she'd sacrificed. Every stitch was made with love. That night, after Lily fell asleep, someone knocked on our front door. Mom frowned. Who could that be? She opened it. No one was there. Only several large boxes sitting on the porch. There was no note. Inside were canned food, fresh fruit, a turkey, blankets, winter coats, children's books, and a brand new portable heater. Mom covered her mouth. Oh my. She looked around the empty street. Whoever had left them was already gone. She whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, I noticed tire tracks in the snow. Old tire tracks, the kind made by Mr. Frank's delivery van. I never asked him about it, and he never mentioned it. Some acts of kindness are meant to stay anonymous. Just when it seemed like life might finally be getting a little easier, everything changed again.
3 days after Christmas, Mom came home early from work. She wasn't carrying her purse. She wasn't wearing her smile. She looked pale. She walked through the front door, took 2 steps, then collapsed onto the living room floor. "Mom!" I rushed to her side. Her skin felt burning hot. Her breathing was shallow. She tried to speak. Only one word came out. "Ethan." Then her eyes closed. I grabbed the phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. As I listened to the dispatcher asking questions, Lily stood in the hallway, clutching her stuffed bunny, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, is Mommy dying?" I looked at my little sister, then at Mom lying unconscious on the floor. For the first time since Dad's death, I didn't know how to answer. Outside, I heard the distant wail of an ambulance growing louder. And deep inside, a terrifying thought echoed through my mind. What if we're about to lose her, too? I used to think the worst day of my life was the day we buried my father. I was wrong. The worst day was the day I thought I was about to lose my mother, too. The ambulance arrived within minutes, and 2 paramedics rushed through the front door carrying medical bags. One of them looked at me and said gently, "Step back, sweetheart." I was holding Lily's hand so tightly that she whimpered, and I hadn't even realized I was hurting her. One of the paramedics knelt beside Mom, quickly checking her condition. "Her pulse is weak. Her temperature is high. Her blood pressure is dropping," he said. I didn't fully understand the medical words, but I understood the expressions on their faces. They were worried, very worried. A police officer placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder and said, "We're taking your mom to St. Mary's Hospital." I immediately replied, "I want to go." He nodded, but glanced at Lily before saying, "You can, but someone has to stay with your sister." Just then, our neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, hurried into the house and offered, "I'll stay with Lily." Lily instantly wrapped both arms around my waist and cried, "No, I'm coming too." Mrs. Ramirez knelt beside her and spoke softly. "Honey, your brother needs to ride with Mommy." Lily shook her head so hard that her curls bounced. "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. I knelt in front of her, gently wiping the tears from her cheeks.
"Listen to me," I said. She looked at me with frightened eyes. "Do you remember what Daddy used to say?" She sniffled and asked, "What?" I smiled as much as I could and answered, "Be brave until the sun comes up." She nodded slowly. "You'll come back?" she asked. "I promise," I replied. She held out her tiny pinky finger. "Pinky promise?" I wrapped my finger around hers and said, "Pinky promise." The ride to the hospital felt endless as the ambulance siren echoed through the night. I sat quietly in the corner, watching strangers fight to keep my mother awake. One of the paramedics called her name. "Emily, can you hear me?" She opened her eyes for only a brief moment and whispered, "Ethan." "I'm here," I answered immediately. She tried to smile, but it faded almost as quickly as it appeared before she drifted away again. I wanted to hold her hand. I wanted to tell her not to leave me, but I was too frightened to move. When we reached the emergency room, everything was painfully bright, and the air smelled strongly of antiseptic. Doctors and nurses rushed around us as they pushed my mother through the double doors. A nurse stopped me before I could follow. "You have to wait here," she said kindly. "When can I see her?" I asked. "As soon as the doctor comes out," she replied. "How long will that be?" I asked, desperate for an answer. She offered a gentle smile and said, "I don't know." I hated those words. I don't know. Adults always seemed to say them when the truth was too painful to admit. Hours passed. I sat alone in a plastic chair. My feet didn't touch the floor. The waiting room television played quietly, but I couldn't hear it. I stared at the emergency room doors. Every time they opened, my heart jumped. Every time they closed, it broke a little more. Finally, a doctor walked toward me. "Are you Ethan?" I stood up immediately. "Yes, I'm Dr. Collins. Is my mom okay?" He knelt so we were eye level. "Your mother has severe pneumonia." I blinked. "I don't know what that means." "It means her lungs are very sick." "Can you fix them?" He hesitated. "We're going to do everything we can." That wasn't an answer. I knew it wasn't. Mrs. Ramirez arrived with Lily about an hour later. The moment Lily saw me, she ran into my arms. "Where's Mommy?" "She's sleeping." "Can we see her?" "I don't know." Lily looked around the waiting room. "Will she wake up?" I smiled, even though it hurt. She always does. I prayed I wasn't lying again. The next morning, Dr. Collins invited us into Mon's hospital room. Machines beeped steadily. Clear tubes ran into her arms. An oxygen mask covered half her face. She looked smaller, like the hospital bed had swallowed her. Lily climbed onto the chair beside the bed. She gently touched Mom's hand. "Mommy?" Mom slowly opened her eyes. There it was, that smile, weak but still hers. "My babies." Her voice sounded rough. "I scared you." Lily burst into tears. "You have to come home." Mom kissed the top of her hand. "I'm trying." After the nurses took Lily to get juice, the doctor asked if he could speak with me. With me, not another adult. Me. We stood in the hallway. "Ethan?" I nodded. "Your mom has been working too much." "I know. She hasn't been eating enough." I looked down. She told us she skipped meals so you and your sister could eat. My chest tightened. She also ignored her illness for weeks. We couldn't afford for her to stop working. The doctor looked at me carefully. How old are you? 9. He closed his eyes for a second. Then he asked something I'll never forget. Who's taking care of you? I answered without thinking. I am. The hallway became very quiet. Mom stayed in the hospital for 6 days. Every afternoon after school, I visited her. Every evening, I returned home to make dinner for Lily. Peanut butter sandwiches, macaroni, soup from a can. Nothing fancy, but enough. After Lily fell asleep, I cleaned the house, finished my homework, prepared breakfast for the morning, then woke up at 4:15 to deliver newspapers. Every day felt exactly the same. Work, school, hospital, home, sleep, repeat. I stopped noticing how tired I was. It simply became part of me. One afternoon, while leaving the hospital, I noticed a vending machine. Inside was Lily's favorite candy bar. It cost $2. I reached into my pocket. I had exactly $2 left after buying groceries. If I bought the candy, we wouldn't have enough milk tomorrow. I stood there for nearly a minute. Then I walked away. That night, Lily smiled anyway. She had made paper flowers from old notebook pages. These are for Mommy. They're beautiful. You think she'll like them? I know she will. Children don't always need expensive gifts. Sometimes love folded from paper is worth more than anything money can buy. Mom finally came home the following Monday. She looked thinner. She walked slower, but she was home. Lily decorated the house with handmade drawings. One said, "Welcome home, Mommy. We love you bigger than the sky." Mom cried before she reached the living room. She hugged both of us for a long time. I missed you. We missed you more. For a little while, everything felt okay again. 3 evenings later, someone knocked on our front door. When I opened it, I saw my father's older brother, Uncle Richard. He wore an expensive coat, a shiny watch, and the same cold expression he'd always had. He hadn't visited once since Dad died. Not once. Now, almost 5 months later, he stood on our porch, holding a leather briefcase. "Hello, Ethan." I didn't answer. Mom slowly walked to the door. "Richard?" He gave a polite smile. "I think it's time we discussed your future." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. He wasn't there because he missed us. He wasn't there to help. He had come for something else. And before he left our house, he would make an offer that would test every promise I'd made to my father. Some people share your last name, but never share your heart. I didn't know that about my uncle. Not yet. At 9 years old, I still believed that family meant people who loved each other. I was about to learn that blood and love aren't always the same thing. Uncle Richard stepped into our house without waiting to be invited. He looked around the living room with the kind of expression people wear when they're inspecting a hotel room. His expensive leather shoes clicked against our old hardwood floor.
It's smaller than I remembered. Mom quietly closed the front door. What brings you here, Richard? He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. I've been worried about you. That was the first lie, because if he'd been worried, he wouldn't have waited 5 months to visit. Lily peeked around the hallway. Who's that? Our uncle, I whispered. She smiled politely. Hi. Richard barely looked at her. Hello. Then his attention returned to Mom. I heard you've been in the hospital. I'm feeling better. I'm glad. He paused. Although, he looked around the house again. I don't think this is the right place for you anymore. Mom frowned. What do you mean? Richard opened his briefcase. He carefully placed several documents on the kitchen table. I've spoken with a real estate agent. The room became very quiet. It's time you sold the house. I felt my heart pounding. What? Richard folded his hands. This place has too many memories. Mom stared at him. This house is my home. It's also expensive. We're managing. He laughed softly. No, you're surviving. His words hung in the air. Cold, sharp, cruel. Mom looked exhausted. I appreciate your concern, but we're staying. Richard sighed dramatically. I expected you'd say that. He slid another paper across the table. I've already found buyers. Mom didn't even look at it. We're not selling. He leaned back in his chair. You really think you can raise 2 children alone? I don't have a choice. You do. He smiled. I can take Ethan. My ears rang. For a second, I thought I'd heard him wrong. You what? He needs opportunities. He needs stability. He needs a real future. Mom stood so quickly, her chair nearly tipped over. He needs his family. Richard shrugged. You're sick. You're broke. And sooner or later, he glanced toward Lily, the state may decide neither child belongs here. The room exploded into silence. Mom's face turned white. Get out. Richard remained seated. I'm trying to help. No. She pointed toward the door. You're trying to separate my children. I'm trying to save one of them. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I'm not leaving. He looked at me for the first time that evening. You'd have your own room. I already have one. You'd attend a private school. I like my school. You'd never have to worry about money ever again. I took one step closer. My mom worries enough for all of us. He stared at me, then shook his head. You're just a child. No, I said quietly. I'm her son. Richard finally stood. He gathered his papers. As he reached the front door, he turned around one last time. You have 1 week. Mom frowned. For what? To think. If you change your mind, he handed her a business card. Call me. Then he left. The sound of his car driving away echoed through the neighborhood. The moment the front door closed, Mom collapsed into a chair. She covered her face with both hands. I'm sorry. I knelt beside her. For what? You shouldn't have heard any of that. I hugged her. I'll never leave. She looked into my eyes. What if staying here means a harder life? I don't care. What if another family could give you everything? I already have everything. She blinked. What do you mean? You and Lily. I don't need anything else. Mom broke down crying. She pulled me into the tightest hug she'd given me since Dad died. I love you so much. I know. I hope you never doubt that. I won't. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I couldn't stop thinking about Uncle Richard. I quietly walked into Dad's old workshop. Everything was still there. The hammer, the measuring tape, his flannel shirt. The smell of sawdust had faded, but it was still there if you breathed deeply enough. I sat on the old workbench.
Then I noticed a dusty wooden toolbox tucked beneath the shelf. I'd never opened it before. Curious, I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of old photographs. Some showed Dad as a little boy. Others were pictures of him and Uncle Richard as teenagers. They looked happy. They smiled together. They fished together. They played baseball together. "What happened?" I whispered. Then I found an old envelope. Across the front, in Grandpa's handwriting, were the words, "For my sons." I carefully unfolded the letter. "Richard and Michael, one day I won't be here to settle your arguments. Money comes and goes. Houses can be rebuilt, but brothers only get one another. If you ever have to choose between wealth and family, choose family. You'll never regret loving each other, but you'll spend the rest of your lives regretting greed." I stared at the letter for a long time. Dad had kept it. Richard must have ignored it. The next afternoon, something unexpected happened at school. Mrs. Anderson asked us to write an essay. The topic was simple: who is your hero? Everyone immediately started writing. My dad, my mom, a firefighter, a football player. I stared at my blank paper. My pencil wouldn't move. Finally, I began writing. My hero is my mom. She thinks I don't notice when she skips meals. She thinks I don't see how tired she is after working all day. She thinks she's failing us because we don't have much money. But she's wrong. My mom is the strongest person I know. She lost the person she loved most all. She still gets up every morning. She still smiles for my little sister. She still hugs me every night. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear waitress uniforms. Sometimes their hands are cracked from cleaning. Sometimes they cry when no one is looking. My hero is my mom because she never stopped fighting for us. When I finished, I realized my paper was wet. I'd been crying without noticing. Mrs. Anderson quietly picked up my essay after class. She didn't say anything. She simply placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. 3 days later, the school held its monthly assembly. Every student gathered in the gymnasium. Parents filled the seats. Mom couldn't come. She was working. Mrs. Anderson walked onto the stage. "We recently asked our students to write about their heroes." Everyone clapped politely. "We received many wonderful essays." She smiled. "But one reminded us all what courage truly looks like." My stomach tightened. Surely not mine. She looked toward the audience. "Ethan Carter." The entire gym turned to look at me. I slowly stood. Mrs. Anderson unfolded a piece of paper. Then she began reading my essay. The room became completely silent. As she read each sentence, I noticed teachers wiping away tears, parents holding their children's hands. Even the principal lowered his head. When she reached the final line, "My hero is my mom because she never stopped fighting for us," there wasn't a single sound in the gym. Then someone stood up and started clapping. Another parent stood, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium rose to its feet, a standing ovation, not for a sports trophy, not for perfect grades, for my mother, for a family that nobody had truly seen until that moment. I had no idea that hidden among the audience was someone who would change our lives forever. A woman I had never met, a woman who had quietly listened to every word, and who was already making a decision that would alter the course of our future. People often think miracles arrive with fireworks. They don't. Sometimes they walk quietly into your life, dressed like an ordinary person. You don't notice them at first. You only realize later that they changed everything. The applause in the school gym lasted longer than I thought possible. I stood frozen. My face burned with embarrassment. I wasn't used to people looking at me. For months, I tried to make myself invisible. Invisible kids don't get asked difficult questions. Invisible kids don't have to explain why they're always tired. Invisible kids don't have to admit they're scared. When the assembly finally ended, dozens of parents stopped Mrs. Anderson to compliment the essay. I slipped out a side door. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to go home. As I reached the school gate, I heard someone call my name. Ethan? I turned around. A woman in her early 60s was walking toward me. She wore a navy blue coat and carried a worn leather notebook under her arm. Her silver hair was tied neatly behind her head. She smiled kindly. That was a beautiful essay. Thank you. I'm Margaret. I nodded politely. My name's Ethan. I know. She laughed softly. I was at the assembly. There was something comforting about her voice. It reminded me of warm tea on a cold day. She wasn't trying to make me feel sorry for myself. She was simply listening. Your mother sounds extraordinary. She is. And your little sister? Lily? How old is she? 4? Margaret smiled. I imagine she keeps you busy. I couldn't help smiling. She talks a lot. Margaret laughed. My granddaughter used to do the same thing. Used to? Her smile faded. They moved across the country. Oh, I don't get to see her very often anymore. For a second, her eyes looked lonely. Maybe that's why she understood mine. A black SUV pulled up beside the sidewalk. A driver stepped out. We should go, Miss Bennett. She nodded. Then looked back at me. Would it be all right if I visited your mother sometime? I frowned. Why? Because I think she'd enjoy having coffee with an old teacher. You were a teacher? For 38 years. That explained everything. She had the same gentle patience as Mrs. Anderson. I shrugged. I guess. She reached into her purse. Not for money. Not for a business card. For a folded piece of paper. It simply read, You are not carrying this alone anymore. She handed it to me. Then she got into the SUV. I watched it disappear down the street. I had no idea who Margaret Bennett really was. That evening, I showed Mom the note. She smiled. That's sweet. Do you know her? No. We thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, someone knocked on our front door. When Mom opened it, Margaret was standing there, holding 2 apple pies. I hope I'm not interrupting dinner. Mom smiled politely. Not at all. Margaret looked around the house. It smells wonderful. Mom laughed. That's because Ethan burns toast almost every morning. I only burned it twice. Mom raised an eyebrow. 5. Maybe 4. Lily giggles from the couch. I like burned toast. We all laughed. It was the first genuine laughter our house had heard in months. Margaret didn't ask about money. She didn't ask about bills. She didn't ask why our furniture was old. Instead, she asked Lily about school. She admired Mom's handmade scarf. She complimented the family picture hanging above the fireplace. She treated us like a normal family, not a charity case. When she finally stood to leave, she paused near Dad's photograph. He had kind eyes. Mom looked at the picture. He really did. Margaret quietly whispered, I can tell. The visits became regular, every Saturday afternoon. Sometimes she brought books, sometimes board games, sometimes homemade soup, sometimes nothing at all. She'd simply sit with Mom and drink coffee. For the first time since Dad died, I saw Mom smiling again, not pretending, actually smiling. One Saturday, Margaret found me in Dad's workshop. I was sanding an old wooden birdhouse he'd started before he died. She watched quietly. Your father taught you. A little. You've got steady hands. I shrugged. I mess up a lot. She smiled. Everyone does. She noticed the old silver compass hanging around my neck. That's beautiful. It was my dad's. You wear it every day? I nodded. It helps. How? It reminds me where home is. Margaret looked away for a moment. Then she whispered, I think your father would be proud of you. Those words hit harder than she could have known. A week later, something strange happened. Mr. Frank pulled his newspaper van beside me after our route. I've got some news. What? I won't need your help anymore. My heart sank. Oh. The paper slipped slightly from my hands. I'm sorry. He quickly smiled. Because... He reached behind the seat. Someone already found you a better job. What? He handed me a flyer. Maple Community Library. After-school assistant needed. Hours, 3:30 to 6 p.m. Homework allowed during quiet hours. Pay, $15 an hour. I stared at the paper. This isn't a joke? No. They specifically asked for you. Who did? Frank simply smiled. I think you already know. Margaret. Mom wasn't sure at first. School comes first. It does. What if your grades suffer? They won't. After talking with the librarian, she finally agreed. It was perfect. I shelved books, helped organize returned novels, read to younger children during story hour. Sometimes little kids climbed into beanbag chairs just to hear me read. I loved it. For the first time, work didn't feel like survival. It felt peaceful.
One afternoon, while organizing donated books, I accidentally overheard two librarians talking. I can't believe Miss Bennet paid for it herself. I know. She doesn't want anyone to know, especially the family. Paid for what? I walked into the office. What did she pay for? The room went silent. One librarian smiled nervously. Oh, nothing. I knew adults well enough by then. Please tell me. She sighed. She asked us not to. I waited. Finally, she whispered, Your library job. What about it? There wasn't actually an opening. I frowned. What? She created one. I couldn't breathe. She also donated enough money to cover your salary for the next year. The room blurred. Why? The librarian smiled gently. She said every hardworking child deserves the chance to be a child sometimes. I looked down at my hands. For months, I'd believed the world had forgotten us. I was wrong. Someone had been watching. Someone had cared. The leaving, I walked to Margaret's house. She answered the door with the same warm smile she always wore. You found out. I nodded. Why? She invited me inside. The walls were covered with photographs of former students. Hundreds of them. Children from every decade of her teaching career. She handed me a cup of hot chocolate, then quietly said, When I was 10 years old. She paused. My father died. I looked up. My mother worked herself sick trying to keep us together. I felt my throat tighten. I had a teacher who refused to let me lose my childhood. She smiled through tears. I've been trying to repay that kindness for 45 years. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, I whispered, Thank you. She reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. No, Ethan. She smiled. Promise me something instead. What? When you're grown, and life finally becomes good again, find someone who's hurting, and become the person they need. I nodded. I promise. For the first time since Dad died, I allowed myself to believe something I hadn't dared to think in nearly a year. Maybe, just maybe, life wasn't finished being kind to us, But while hope was quietly returning to our little house, someone else was making plans in the shadows. Across town, Uncle Richard sat inside a lawyer's office. He slid a folder across the desk. "I want custody of my nephew." The lawyer looked surprised. "Does the mother know?" Richard smiled coldly. "Not yet." As he signed the paperwork, he looked out the window and whispered to himself, "The boy doesn't belong in that house." He had no idea. He wasn't just about to challenge my mother. He was about to awaken an entire community that had finally begun to see the truth.
Some nightmares happen while you're asleep. Others arrive in broad daylight, holding official papers, smiling politely, and pretending they're doing what's best for you. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The library was unusually quiet. Only a few children sat in the reading corner while I returned books to the shelves. Mrs. Parker, the head librarian, smiled at me. "You're getting faster." "I've had practice." She laughed. "You certainly have." For the first time in almost a year, I actually looked forward to the next day. School no longer felt like a place where I had to hide. The library felt safe. Home felt warmer. Mom's health had improved. Lily smiled more often. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I should have known. Peace never lasts forever. When I walked home that evening, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front of our house. A black sedan. 2 people in business clothes stood on the porch. Mom opened the door. Her face immediately lost its color. One woman introduced herself. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes." "I'm Miss Daniels." "This is Mr. Foster." "We're with Child Protective Services." My heart stopped. I froze halfway up the sidewalk. Child Protective Services? Why? Mom looked just as confused. "There must be some mistake." Miss Daniels spoke gently. "We received a report expressing concerns about the welfare of your children." "My children are fine. We're simply here to ask a few questions." Lily peeked around Mom's legs. "Who are they?" Mom forced a smile. "Friends." But I knew they weren't. The social workers sat at our kitchen table. They asked polite questions. "Who prepares meals?" "Ethan helps." "Who watches Lily while you're working?" "Our neighbor or Ethan after school." "Does Ethan have a job?" Mom hesitated. "He helps at the library." "Is he paid?" "Yes." Mr. Foster wrote something in his notebook. Every scratch of his pen sounded louder than the last. Then came the question that made my stomach twist. "Mrs. Carter, have your children ever gone without food?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "There were days," she whispered, "when I skipped meals." "We didn't," I interrupted. "I made sure Lily always ate." The room fell silent. Miss Daniels looked at me. "How old are you, Ethan?" 10. She blinked. "You sound older." I didn't know whether that was a compliment or a tragedy. They walked through the house, checked the bedrooms, opened the refrigerator, looked inside the cabinets, inspected the bathroom. Buddy followed them everywhere, wagging his tail. Even he wanted them to know we weren't dangerous. We were just trying. Before leaving, Miss Daniels smiled kindly. "Your home is clean. Your children clearly love you." Mom nodded. "But," she sighed, "the report included allegations that Ethan is being forced to work and that the children are being neglected." Mom looked horrified. "Forced?" "No. He wanted to help. We understand. But we still have to investigate." After they left, our house felt colder than it had all winter. That night, Mom barely spoke. She sat at the kitchen table long after Lily had gone to bed. I placed a mug of tea beside her. "You okay?" She smiled weakly. I thought we were finally catching our breath. I sat across from her. We'll be okay. She looked at me. You always say that. Because it's true. What if they take you away? They won't. But what if they do? I reached across the table and held her hand. They'd have to drag me out of this house. She laughed through tears. You sound just like your father. I smiled. I hope that's a good thing. It is. It's the best thing. The next morning, Margaret Bennett came to visit. She already knew. Before Mom even explained. I heard CPS stopped by. Mom looked surprised. How? I have friends. Margaret listened carefully as Mom explained everything. When she finished, Margaret calmly opened her notebook. I'll be making a few phone calls. You don't have to. I know. She smiled. I'm going to anyway. Within 48 hours, something remarkable happened. Letters began arriving at our house. One from Mrs. Anderson, another from Mr. Frank, one from the librarian, then another, then another. By the end of the week, there were nearly 50 letters. Each one told the same story. Ethan is not being neglected. He is loved. His mother is devoted. This family deserves support, not separation. The kitchen table disappeared beneath envelopes. Mom cried every time she opened another one. The following Monday, CPS scheduled a formal meeting. Mom looked terrified. I don't know what to say. Margaret squeezed her hand. You'll tell the truth. The meeting took place in a small conference room downtown. Mom sat on one side. I sat beside her. Lily colored quietly with crayons. Across the table sat Miss Daniels, Mr. Foster, and another supervisor. Then the door opened again. Margaret walked in. So did Mrs. Anderson, Mr. Frank, Mrs. Parker from the library, even Mrs. Ramirez. One by one, people who loved us filled the room. No one had been asked. They simply came. The supervisor looked surprised. Who are all these people? Margaret smiled. The village. One by one, they spoke. Mrs. Anderson described the little boy who stayed after class to help clean the room without being asked. Mr. Frank talked about the freezing mornings Ethan spent delivering newspapers, not because anyone forced him, but because he loved his family. Mrs. Parker explained how Ethan spent library breaks reading to younger children instead of playing games. Mrs. Ramirez spoke about all the nights Ethan made dinner for Lily and still finished his homework. Finally, Margaret stood. She placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were dozens of letters from neighbors, teachers, parents, church members, even the motel manager where Mom worked. Then she quietly said, I've taught children for 38 years. I know the difference between an abused child and a child carrying more responsibility than any child should. She looked directly at the supervisor. This family doesn't need to be divided. They need to be supported. The room fell silent. The supervisor slowly closed the folder. He looked at Mom, then at me, then at Lily, who was proudly showing Buddy she'd drawn with crayons. Finally, he smiled. I think we've seen enough. Mom held her breath. The supervisor continued. The investigation is closed. No recommendation for removal. No further action. Instead, he slid another folder across the table. This contains information about assistance programs, counseling, food support, and scholarships. We'd rather help your family stay together. Mom burst into tears. Not tears of fear, tears of relief. I wrapped my arms around her. For the first time in a year, it truly felt like we had won. As everyone left the building, I noticed Uncle Richard standing across the parking lot. His expensive suit looked out of place beside the old pickup trucks and family cars. He had expected us to come out defeated. Instead, he watched as teachers hugged us. Neighbors shook Mom's hand. Mr. Frank lifted Lily onto his shoulders. Margaret stood beside us like family. Richard's lawyer quietly whispered, "The case is over." Richard stared at the crowd surrounding us. For the first time, he looked completely alone. He turned without saying a word, got into his car, and drove away. I thought that would be the last time we'd ever see him. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because 6 months later, he would return carrying something none of us expected. Not another lawsuit, not another threat, but the truth about my father. A truth that had been hidden for decades, and it would change everything I thought I knew about my family.
People think the hardest words to hear are, "I'm sorry for your loss." They're not. The hardest words are the ones that make you question everything you thought you knew about someone you loved. And 6 months after Uncle Richard disappeared from our lives, those words arrived with a single knock on our front door. Spring had finally returned. The snow was gone. The trees outside our little white house were green again. For the first time since Dad died, life felt normal. Mom had regained her strength. She still worked hard, but thanks to the assistance programs and the kindness of our community, she no longer worked 2 jobs. I still helped at the library every afternoon, but now, after work, I actually had time to play baseball with my friends. Lily had started kindergarten. Every afternoon she ran home with another drawing in her backpack. One day it was our family. The next day it was Buddy chasing butterflies. She always drew Dad too, standing in the clouds, watching over us. She said it made heaven feel closer. None of us ever corrected her. One Saturday morning, we were planting flowers in the front yard. Mom knelt beside the garden. "You've planted that one upside down." I looked at the flower. "Oh." Lily burst into laughter. "Evan's flower is sleeping." I laughed too. "I guess it is." Buddy barked happily as if he agreed. It was such an ordinary moment, one I'd dreamed about during all those dark nights. Then, a black sedan pulled into our driveway. I recognized it immediately. Uncle Richard. Nobody smiled. Nobody waved. Mom slowly stood. "What do you want?" Richard stepped out of the car. He looked different, older, thinner. The confidence he'd always carried had disappeared. Instead of his expensive briefcase, he carried a worn cardboard box. "I'd like to talk." Mom crossed her arms. "We have nothing to discuss." "I understand." He looked down. "But please, just 5 minutes." Mom hesitated, then looked at me. I nodded. Sometimes, people deserve the chance to explain, not because they've earned forgiveness, but because the truth matters. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Dad used to drink coffee every morning. Richard carefully placed the box in front of him. "I've been cleaning out my house." No one answered. "I found these in the attic." He slowly opened the box. Inside were dozens of old notebooks, photo albums, letters, and one small metal cash box. My heart skipped a beat. The handwriting on one notebook looked familiar. Dad's. Richard took a deep breath. "I owe all of you an apology." Mom remained silent. I was angry. For years. At Michael. My father. He was always the favorite. Mom finally spoke. "He was never anyone's favorite." Richard shook his head. "That's what I believed. When Dad died, I blamed Michael for everything." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard looked at me. "There was an inheritance." Mom looked surprised. "What inheritance?" "Our father's savings. I thought Michael had convinced him to leave me less, so I stopped speaking to him. But that wasn't true. He opened one of the notebooks. It wasn't Michael. It was me." The room became silent. Richard's voice shook. "I had borrowed money from Dad years earlier. A lot of money. I never paid him back. When Grandpa updated his will, he simply deducted what I already owed." He looked down. "But instead of admitting that, I blamed my brother." Mom whispered. "So all those years?" Richard nodded. "I wasted them. I missed birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. I let my pride become more important than my family." He wiped his eyes. "And then Michael died, before I could tell him I was wrong." I looked toward Dad's picture hanging on the wall. He'd spent years believing his own brother hated him, and yet he'd never once spoken badly about Richard. Not once. I remembered Grandpa's letter. "Choose family."
Dad had listened. Richard hadn't, until it was too late. Then Richard opened the metal cash box. Inside was an envelope with my mother's name written across the front. Emily Carter. Mom slowly picked it up. "I've never seen this." Richard nodded. "It was hidden beneath the attic floorboards. It must have fallen through years ago." Mom carefully opened it. Inside was another letter, written by Dad. She began reading aloud. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me. First, I need you to know something I've never been good at saying enough. Thank you. Thank you for believing in me when I doubted myself. Thank you for making our house feel like home. Thank you for giving me Ethan and Lily. They are the greatest gifts God ever gave me. Please don't let Ethan grow up believing he has to become me. Let him become himself. Tell him that kindness will always matter more than strength. Tell Lily that every bedtime story I ever read her was really for me, because hearing her laugh made every hard day worth it. And if my brother ever comes back, forgive him. He has always carried pain he never learned how to speak about. Don't let my children inherit our silence. Love them enough to forgive what I could not fix. Forever yours, Michael." Mom couldn't finish. She broke into tears. No one spoke. Even Buddy quietly rested his head on Mom's lap. Richard covered his face. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No," Mom answered honestly. "You don't." He nodded. "I know, but I wanted you to have that letter. And..." He reached into the box again. "This." He placed a small velvet pouch on the table. Inside was Dad's wedding ring. Mom gasped. "I thought it was lost." Richard swallowed hard. "It wasn't. I kept it. For years. I told myself I'd return it someday. He couldn't continue. Shame filled the silence. I picked up the ring. It was scratched, worn, ordinary. Dad had worn it every day. I slipped it into Mom's hand. "It belongs with you." She closed her fingers around it, as if she were holding his hand again. Before leaving, Richard stopped beside me. "Ethan." "Yes? I heard about your essay." "You did?" He nodded. "Your father would have framed it." A lump formed in my throat. "I miss him." "So do I." Richard looked toward Dad's photograph. "I spent years believing I hated him." He smiled sadly. "The truth is, I never stopped loving my little brother." He walked to the door, then paused. "If you ever need anything..." He looked back. "I'll answer this time." After he left, Mom carried Dad's letter to the living room. That evening, the three of us sat together on the couch. She read it again. This time, more slowly. Lily climbed into her lap. "Was Daddy talking to us?" Mom smiled through tears. "He always was." That night before going to bed, I placed Dad's old silver compass beside his wedding ring on the fireplace mantel. For the first time, the house didn't feel like it was missing pieces anymore. Dad wasn't coming back. Nothing would ever change that. But somehow, his love had found its way home. A month later, Mrs. Anderson stopped me after school. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "I've nominated you for something." "What?" She smiled. "The State Young Citizen Award." I laughed. "You've got the wrong kid." "No." She looked me straight in the eyes. "I've got exactly the right one." I had no idea what that award was, or that accepting it would place me on a stage in front of hundreds of strangers, where one speech from a 10-year-old boy would inspire an entire state and bring someone from my father's past to the audience with a secret that would change my future forever.
People often ask me when my life truly changed. Some think it was the day my father died. Others believe it her illness. Some say it was when our community stood beside us. Those moments changed my circumstances, but the day that changed me was the day I stood behind a podium looking at hundreds of strangers, trying not to cry. 2 months after Mrs. Anderson nominated me, a large white envelope arrived in our mailbox. Mom opened it while I helped Lily with her homework. She suddenly gasped. "Ethan." "What?" She covered her mouth. "You won." "I won what?" "The State Young Citizen Award." I blinked. There has to be a mistake. Mom laughed through tears. "There isn't." Lily jumped off her chair. "My brother won." Buddy barked excitedly, running circles around the kitchen. I looked at the letter again. It didn't feel real. Why would anyone give an award to a kid who simply tried to help his family?
The ceremony was scheduled for the following month in the state capital. It would be the first time I'd ever traveled farther than 2 counties away. There was only one problem. We couldn't afford the trip. Gas, hotel, a suit. Everything cost money we didn't have. When Mrs. Anderson found out, she smiled. Leave that to us. Within 3 days, the entire community had quietly come together. The local tailor donated a navy blue suit. The church paid for our hotel. Mr. Frank filled Mom's gas tank. The library staff packed sandwiches for the trip. No one asked for recognition. No one expected anything in return. They simply wanted us to go. I realized something Dad had always known. A strong community isn't built by wealthy people. It's built by kind people. The morning of the ceremony, I stood in front of the hotel mirror. The suit fit perfectly. I barely recognized myself. Mom adjusted my tie. You look so handsome. I look uncomfortable. She laughed. That's because you're wearing a tie. Lily walked in wearing a bright yellow dress. She twirled proudly. Do I look fancy? You look like sunshine. She smiled so wide I thought her cheeks might burst. The state capitol was enormous. Marble floors, tall columns, huge chandeliers. Everything echoed. I held Dad's silver compass in my pocket. Whenever I felt nervous, I wrapped my hand around it. It reminded me of home. Backstage, I met the other award recipients. One girl had started collecting books for children in homeless shelters. Another boy had raised money for veterans. A teenager had built wheelchair ramps for elderly neighbors. Compared to them, I felt ordinary. I don't belong here, I whispered. Mrs. Anderson overheard me. She gently placed a hand on my shoulder. You belong exactly where kindness brings you. The ceremony began. One by one, names were called. Families cheered. Photographs flashed. Then, ladies and gentlemen, the announcer smiled. Our final recipient, Ethan Carter. The applause echoed through the hall. My legs suddenly felt heavy. I walked toward the stage, accepted the medal, shook the governor's hand. Then someone whispered, "The microphone is yours." My heart nearly stopped. I had completely forgotten about the speech. I unfolded the small piece of paper Mom had helped me write. My hand shook so badly the paper rattled. I looked at the audience. Hundreds of faces stared back. Then I noticed Mom. She smiled. Lily waved both hands enthusiastically. Mrs. Anderson nodded. Mr. Frank gave me a thumbs up. Margaret placed one hand over her heart. I took a deep breath. Good afternoon. My name is Ethan. I'm 10 years old. A few people smiled. I don't really know why I won this award. Soft laughter filled the room. I only did what I thought my dad would have done. The room became quiet. My dad died when I was 9. I thought that meant I had to become the man of the house. I paused. I was wrong. I looked toward Mom. I wasn't the man of the house. My mom was. The audience nodded quietly. She worked when she was tired. She smiled when she was scared. She loved us even when she thought she wasn't enough. I swallowed hard. My teacher taught me that asking for help isn't weakness. My neighbor taught me that kindness doesn't need applause. My library taught me that stories can heal people. My community taught me that family isn't only the people you're born with. I reached into my pocket, pulled out Dad's compass. My father gave me this. He told me, a compass doesn't choose your path. It only reminds you where you are. I looked around the room. I know where I am now. I'm surrounded by people who chose kindness. So, if you think one small act doesn't matter, it does. It might save someone's whole world. I folded the paper, then added something I hadn't planned. If your parents are still alive, please hug them tonight. If your children are waiting for you at home, don't work so much that you forget to tell them you love them. And if someone near you is struggling, don't wait until it's too late to help. I know what that feels like. Thank you. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then someone stood, then another. Within moments, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Some people cried openly. Others hugged their families. Even the governor wiped his eyes before shaking my hand again. You've reminded us what leadership really looks like. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached us. Parents, teachers, reporters. One elderly man hugged me tightly. My son stopped speaking to me 5 years ago. He wiped away tears. I'm calling him tonight. A young mother smiled. I've been working every weekend. I'm taking tomorrow off to spend with my kids. A teacher whispered. I'm going to pay closer attention to the quiet students. I realized then, stories don't just entertain, they change people. As the crowd slowly disappeared, a man in his 70s approached us. He wore an old military jacket decorated with faded patches. His eyes never left my father's compass. Excuse me, he spoke softly. Where did you get that? It belonged to my dad. What was his name? Michael Carter. The man's face turned pale. He slowly removed his cap. I served with your father. Mom looked surprised. You knew Michael? He nodded. We were best friends. My name is Samuel Brooks. I've been looking for your family. He reached into his coat pocket, carefully, slowly. Then he pulled out a small weathered notebook. I've carried this for almost 11 years. He looked directly at me. Your father asked me to give it to his son when he was old enough to understand it. My hands trembled as I accepted the notebook. On the front cover, written in Dad's unmistakable handwriting, were 5 simple words. For Ethan, when you become a man. I looked up at Mr. Brooks, my heart pounding. What's inside? He smiled sadly. I never opened it. It wasn't meant for me. As I held the notebook against my chest, I felt as if Dad had reached across time to place one final gift in my hands. I had no idea what those pages contained, but somehow, I knew they would answer questions I'd carried since the day I watched his blue pickup truck disappear around the corner.
Some people leave behind houses. Some leave behind money. Some leave behind family heirlooms. My father left me something far more valuable. His voice, written on paper, waiting patiently for the day I was finally ready to hear it. The ride home from the award ceremony was quiet, not because we had nothing to say, because none of us could stop thinking about the notebook. It rested on my lap the entire drive. I didn't open it, not once. Every few minutes, I'd run my fingers over the worn leather cover. Mom glanced at me from the driver's seat. You don't have to read it tonight. I nodded. I know. But deep inside, I already knew I would. That evening, after Lily fell asleep, Mom made hot chocolate, just like she used to before Dad died. We sat together in the living room, Buddy curled up at our feet. The old grandfather clock ticked softly in the corner. Mom looked at the notebook. Are you ready? I wasn't, but I also knew I'd never be. I slowly untied the faded leather strap holding it closed. Inside the front cover, written in my father's handwriting, were the words, "If you're reading this, then you've already become someone I'm proud of." My vision blurred immediately. The first page wasn't a letter. It was a list. At the top, Dad had written, "Things I hope you never forget." 1. Say I love you before leaving home. 2. Apologize first. Pride is expensive. 3. Never measure people by their bank account. 4. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. 5. Work hard, but never work so hard that your family becomes strangers. 6. Laugh loudly. 7. Cry honestly. 8. Keep promises. 9. Forgive faster than you think you should. 10. Come home often. I smiled through tears. Each sentence sounded exactly like him. Simple, honest, full of love. The next page began with a date. It had been written almost 2 years before Dad died. Dear Ethan, today you hit your first baseball through our neighbor's window. You cried harder than Mrs. Jenkins did. I laughed the whole way home. Someday you'll make much bigger mistakes. When you do, remember that broken things can usually be repaired. Broken relationships are much harder. Choose people over being right. I laughed. Mom laughed too. I remember that window. So do I. You thought Mrs. Jenkins would call the police. I did. Page after page contained memories. The first fish we caught together, the camping trip where rain soaked our tent, the day Lily was born, the first time I rode my bicycle without training wheels. Every memory ended the same way, with a lesson. Not a lecture, a lesson. Halfway through the notebook, everything changed. There was another sealed envelope. Across the front, Dad had written, "Open only when you believe you failed." I looked at Mom. She nodded. "It's your decision."
I hesitated, then carefully opened it. Inside was one sheet of paper. Ethan, if you've opened this, then I imagine you're blaming yourself for something. Listen to me carefully. You are not responsible for carrying the entire world. You were never meant to replace me. You were only meant to become yourself. If your mother cries, love her. Don't fix her. If Lily struggles, stand beside her. Don't carry her. If life becomes heavy, ask for help. Strong people build teams. They don't build prisons around themselves. I know you'll try to save everyone. Please, save yourself too. Love, Dad. I couldn't breathe. Every word felt like he'd been watching my life, as if somehow he knew. He knew about the newspapers. He knew about the sleepless mornings. He knew about the lies I'd told to protect everyone. He knew about the fear. I buried my face in my hands. I wasn't supposed to become you. Mom wrapped her arms around me. No, you were supposed to become Ethan. The next morning, something changed inside me. For the first time in almost 2 years, I stopped trying to be the man of the house. Instead, I became a son again. I laughed more, played baseball after school, read comic books with Lily, built birdhouses with Mr. Frank, helped Mom because I wanted to, not because I thought the world would fall apart if I didn't. Dad's notebook had given me permission to be a kid. Months passed. Life continued moving forward. Mom received a promotion at the motel. She became the front office manager. The extra income meant she finally worked normal hours. She never missed another school event. Every Friday became family night. Pizza, movies, board games. No phones, no work, just us. Exactly the way Dad would have wanted. One autumn afternoon, Margaret invited us to the library. She smiled proudly. I have something to show you. She led us to the children's reading room. Above the entrance hung a brand new wooden sign, the Michael Carter Reading Corner. I froze. What is this? Mrs. Parker smiled. After hearing your story, the community donated enough money to renovate the children's room. Margaret added, we wanted children to remember a man who believed kindness mattered. I looked around. New books, comfortable chairs, bright murals, kids laughing together. Dad's name would live there, long after all of us were gone. That evening, we visited Dad's grave. The sun was setting. The air smelled like fallen leaves. Mom placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. Lily laid down one of her drawings. It showed all 4 of us holding hands, even Dad, standing among the clouds. I knelt beside the grave.
I finally read your notebook. The wind rustled through the trees. I've been trying so hard to become you. I smiled. But I think you'd rather I became myself. For a moment, the breeze brushed gently across my face. It almost felt like one of Dad's hugs. Almost. As we walked back toward the car, Lily slipped her small hand into mine. Ethan? Yeah? Do you think Daddy can see us? I looked up at the sky glowing orange and gold, then smiled. I think he'd be really proud. She grinned. I hope so. So do I. Years later, when I became a father myself, I found Dad's notebook in my desk drawer. Its pages had grown soft with age. The ink had faded in places, but the lessons were still as clear as ever. That night, I sat beside my own son as he fell asleep. Before turning off the light, I whispered the same words my father had spoken to me hundreds of times. I love you, buddy. He smiled sleepily. I love you too, Dad. I stayed there for a long moment after he'd fallen asleep, because I finally understood something my father had been trying to teach me all along. A parent's greatest gift isn't money,
or success, or even protection. It's making sure their children never have to wonder if they were loved. I never wondered again. Not after the notebook. Not after the letters. Not after the people who carried us when we couldn't stand. My father died when I was 9 years old, but his love raised me anyway.